Good morning. Welcome to Breakfast with Roger Johnson and Rachel Burden.
Hello, good morning. Our headlines today. Israel says its military action in Gaza will continue as long as necessary as diplomatic efforts to get a ceasefire are stepped up.
Efforts to combat the Indian variant of COVID ramp up ahead of lockdown restrictions being relaxed tomorrow.
More than 20 people were arrested in Glasgow and 3 police officers were injured after Rangers supporters celebrated their first Scottish Premiership title in a decade.
Good morning. It's fifth time lucky for Leicester, FA Cup winners for the first time in the club's history after victory over Chelsea at Wembley.
And in weather, in case you were wondering, it is another day of dodging the downpours out there. Surprise, surprise. The Sunday forecast and a look at what to expect in the week ahead is on the way.
It's Sunday, May the 16th. Our top story this morning. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to continue to respond forcefully to rocket attacks as the conflict with Palestinians in Gaza enters a 7th day.
Last night, US President Joe Biden spoke by phone to the Israeli Prime Minister and the Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas. Helena Wilkinson reports.
Within seconds, this building in Gaza is reduced to rubble. It was home to journalists from the Associated Press and Al Jazeera TV. An hour earlier, they had been told to evacuate. Israel says the building was a target because of links to Hamas, the militant group that rules Gaza.
Israel is doing everything possible to protect our civilians and keep Palestinian civilians out of harm's way. We demonstrated this yet again today when we warned civilians to vacate the building used by the Hamas terror intelligence. They vacated the premises before the target was destroyed, and that's why you don't hear of casualties from these collapsing terror towers.
There have, though, been civilian casualties on both sides. Early this morning, Israel targeted a house in Gaza that it says belonged to a Hamas leader. Palestinian health officials say that at least 3 people died and many others were injured. In an earlier Israeli attack, Mohammed al-Hadidi lost his wife and 4 young sons. His baby son, Omar, who's just 5 months old, was the only survivor. In Ramat Gan, a suburb of Tel Aviv, a Hamas missile killed a man in his 50s. He was reportedly hit by shrapnel in his apartment. In Sheikh Jarrah, there continues to be anger and tension. Attempts to evict Palestinians from their homes in this area earlier this month helped start the escalation to the conflict. US President Joe Biden has spoken to Israeli and Palestinian leaders ahead of a UN Security Council meeting later today. But with neither side appearing to back down, the quick breakthrough seems a distant prospect. Helena Wilkinson, BBC News.
Efforts are being stepped up to combat the increase in the Indian variant of coronavirus as lockdown restrictions are eased in England, Wales and much of Scotland tomorrow.
Yeah, it comes amid a huge demand for coronavirus jabs as the vaccine rollout moves to people in their 30s. Our correspondent Daniela Relf has more.
Margaret Keenan was the first back in December, but now 30 million people in England have received their first dose of the vaccine, and 15 million, that's around 1 in 3 people, have had both doses. And as the rollout moves to people in their 30s, there's been a huge demand for appointments. Officials say they've witnessed a surge in bookings since Thursday, when 38 and 39-year-olds were allowed to book a jab. More than 611,000 first and second appointments have been made. This group will be offered the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine. And younger people in their 30s will be called up shortly as the vaccination programme moves down the age groups. Queuing for a jab in Bolton, like in other areas, efforts are being stepped up to contain the Indian variant of coronavirus. But officials have stressed it's not just about vaccines. More needs to be done to stop the spread.
All aspects are important: testing, tracing, isolation and vaccination, all really important. It's not one single solution, it's working together but also with our communities as well to make sure we support all of this.
In England, 2/3 of people may have had their first dose of the vaccine. But as restrictions begin to ease, the message of caution and restraint remains. Daniela Ralph, BBC News.
Now, 3 police officers have been injured and 20 people were arrested after clashes broke out in Glasgow as Rangers fans celebrated their first Scottish Premiership trophy in a decade.
Thousands of supporters took to the streets despite warnings against large gatherings due to coronavirus. Our Scotland reporter Alexandra Mackenzie reports.
Rangers fans celebrated well into the evening in Glasgow's George Square. Police Scotland said some became increasingly disorderly. Property was damaged and missiles and flares were thrown at police. At least 3 officers were injured and more than 20 people were arrested. Rows of officers with full public ordered equipment, including plastic shields, moved in to disperse the crowd. Chief Superintendent Mark Sutherland described the behaviour as disgraceful and said it had posed a threat to public and police safety. He said those involved in causing the trouble would be identified and arrested.
Now, a major incident has been declared after a gas explosion at a residential area in Heysham in Lancashire. Lancashire Fire Service were called to a row of terraced houses in the early hours of the morning this morning. Firefighters were searching a collapsed property after reports of an explosion. Lancashire Police say that a safety cordon has been put in place and nearby residents have been evacuated.
Santander says all of its services have returned to normal after technical problems meant customers were unable to access their money for much of yesterday. The bank's online banking and app stopped working, and there were also issues in branches and with cards. The companies apologised and promised no one will be out of pocket.
Now, from tomorrow, holidaymakers from the UK will be allowed to enter Portugal despite lockdown restrictions being extended there.
Yeah, lucky you if you're going on holiday. The country is on the UK's green list, which means travellers do not need to self-isolate on their return. But proof of a negative COVID test will be needed in order to enter the country. Nick Beak reports.
So here it is, the sea, the sand, the sunshine. Finally, once again, this will be a reality for British holidaymakers, and they'll be on their way in less than 24 hours from now. And here on the Algarve, they're absolutely delighted. This place is so reliant on tourism, and for the past 14-15 months, they've been really hit hard during the COVID pandemic. If you look at the stats at the local airport, Faro, in a normal year, around half of all arrivals would be coming from the UK, and with them they'd bring about £500 million, really boosting the Portuguese economy. And that's why we see at the moment on the beaches, in the hotels, in the restaurants, they're putting all the last minute touches together, waiting for this first wave of British tourists coming back once again. And once they get here, they'll find that there isn't a need to quarantine. People will be able to eat indoors and outdoors. You'll see some masks, and there are some social distancing rules, because here in Portugal the government has extended the sort of state of alert until the end of the month. But cases have been going down and people are really glad. They feel they're turning a corner. And of course, Portugal is really popular at the moment because it's on the UK green list, unlike Italy, Spain, Greece. And so talking to people here in the tourist industry, they really feel they need to capitalise on this head start they've got over some of their key rivals. So really lots of people excited here, waiting for the British tourists to come back, and they haven't got long to wait now.
See the headlines as they happen and watch BBC News live in the app and get the full story with bbc.co.uk/news. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.